Hello, everyone. Welcome to Making a Footprint in a Crowded Space, How Indies Make Their Mark. I'm your moderator, Trey Morgan from Clear Channel Radio. Along with me, we have Justin Hochberg, co-founder of the Hochberg-Ebersol Company. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Also here today, Jason Hervey, co-founder of Bischoff Hervey Entertainment. Thank you for being here. Chris Sloan is also here today, president and executive director for 2C Media. Hello. He's got a fan already.
It's my wife.
Mom,
You've done a job.
You're lucky to clap.
Had to have a ringer.
And at the very end, Colby Gaines, founder, Backroads Entertainment. Thank you all for being here today. I wanted to start this off and kind of set the table for what we're talking about today. And I'll ask you, Colby, in your opinion, what is the state of the industry right now in respects to what you do?
Well, I think that there's huge changes. Everybody wants to peer into the crystal ball and tell everyone else what they think. I guess the state of the industry, as I'm seeing it, is there's more opportunity than ever. You can look around at projects that cost $15,000 and make $160 million, Paranormal Activity, The Angry Orange. You know, there's so much opportunity for smaller first-timers to really get out there and make their mark. Of course, it's a very saturated marketplace, so making that mark is becoming exponentially more difficult. But the top line is that there's just a lot more opportunity, I think, than there used to be.
Okay. Chris, do you agree with how cheery that sounds?
How cheery it sounds?
It sounds very, very optimistic. Do you agree wholeheartedly with that?
You know, I do, to the sense that there is obviously a lot of opportunity. By the same token, our industry is being savaged by, really, really challenging business models that do trickle down to us independents, as far as the types of deals that can be made, consolidation, industry consolidations made it challenging. Sometimes there's people that are, it's become risk averse. But at the same time, while the business models are under challenge, a lot of challenges, what's interesting is you have all sorts of new buyers in the market like Hulu and Netflix for our kind of content you never would have even had before. So that gate is opening, and that to me is really, really exciting because I believe that in a few years it's possible that some of our existing cable channel network buyers may not exist. There'll be new networks and new buyers that we can't even conceive of now.
Now, is that something that you've started strategizing for the potential that these cable buyers won't be there, or is that something just in the back of your mind that maybe one day you'll have to address, but right now you're not really working on a strategy for that?
Well, I think overall our strategy is always to find, breakthrough ideas that have as many opportunities in the marketplace as possible, as many buyers as possible. But you're starting to pay attention to a lot more niche players that really seem to have resources than you would have before. And so I think that's really, really, I think that's interesting, particularly with what Hulu's done. Hulu going into original content and the types of product they're looking at. I think that's definitely something we're looking at as a buyer.
Now, is it easier now with more outlets than it was 5 years ago, Jason? 10 years ago?
I'm losing my voice, so forgive me, everybody. But is it easier? And actually, what I would say is I'd look at it a little bit differently than my colleagues. Is that it also creates a challenge because you only have so much bandwidth, resource, and focus. And then as you deploy those kind of strategic investments of your company, be it in development staff, be it in creating your own pilots and your own pilot presentations, it becomes a highest and best use of time, energy, and resources. And there are so many places that also, equal the opportunity is equal the challenge. So if you only have so many hours in a day, once you get through, if let's say your project gets passed on by the traditional, cable outlets, or if it's a network show, whatever it is, it really, those secondary markets, you don't know where to go. Sometimes there are so many choices, it almost can also become a distraction.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you share that sentiment, or do you?
Yeah, I think though, macro, if you're in this business as a producer, you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And by definition, entrepreneurs need to be optimistic. So if someone's up here who's a producer and not optimistic, we got a big problem, because it doesn't make it true. It just means that's your delusional way of looking at it, which is we're going to make it happen. We're going to figure out the way to do something. And so I think,
like everyone here, delusionally optimistic that there's a ton of opportunity. Right? But I think statistically, though, the truth is there's more cable channels doing more unscripted programming than there was last year or the year before, right? So, you know, there's rebranded channels. As an example, this year alone, TNT is doing reality. Wasn't last year. USA doing reality. You know, Reels Channel looking to do reality. So, you know, there's other things like Military Channel probably looking to upgrade. You know, they're part of History Channel. So there's just more outlets for programming, which people don't realize just creates great opportunity. So I think this year and the next couple of years, you'll see still a big growth, especially in the U.S. cable.
Now, with the fragmentation of the Hulus and the Netflix and essentially starting to cut out the middleman, you know, some of the networks, some of the cable providers, are you starting to strategize ways to directly reach to the consumer as a producer, as a content producer? Is that something that you're starting to do?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, you know, we're fortunate because we have the lowest cost production model of anybody else. Not me personally, but the reality genre, right?
Yours is one of the biggest.
But we can do it cheaper than, say, scripted people,
Yeah.
or you know. So Hulu and stuff like that is made for us. I mean, you know, it's quick, it's cheap, it still can be high content. The other thing that people are doing, and we do a lot of this, is we work with brands. So, you know, we operate a branded entertainment part of our business, and we look to work directly with the people creating that content. Those guys, Procter & Gamble, Coke, Pepsi, they very much are always looking for creative ways to get their ideas out there because 30-second ads aren't doing it. And so that's another way to get right direct to consumers that you don't actually even have to fund.
So when you're placing a product in a show, how do you find a way in which to make it really relevant without it being obtuse and obnoxious to where it actually turns off the consumer, though?
It's a big problem. I think I call it Elvis ads. If you ever remember Elvis movies, he'd be talking like this, and in the middle of it he'd go, "Oh my God," and start singing right out of the blue. You had no idea, and it never really worked. It's the same thing with brands. And so I think branded entertainment gets a bad rap because it often looks obtrusive and bad. But casting a brand and figuring out how to put it in there like they do on The Apprentice, which is where I cut my teeth early on, is an art just like casting and picking a great person on Jersey Shore. And you just have to have that mindset of how do you create a story, whether it's for a brand or for a person, and make it work so it's not in your face, but actually enhances the experience.
Yeah, I would say just have the brand not overshadow the intent of the scene. That's really a short answer for that.
Well, I mean, it speaks volumes because oftentimes you do see where the brand becomes too much of a focal point and then it distracts from the content and the brand as well. Do you guys have anything to add?
I think the further you go in business, my accountant always says you become an accountant. I think I've grown in business and I moved a little bit away from where I started. I truly started at a local CBS affiliate and worked my way up the sort of reality charts, doing production and learning storytelling as an art and as a craft and really caring about that. At the end of the day, if you're dealing with brands, I mean, some brands are going to let you bury their brand to some degree and let you tell a story that's much more engaging and less advertorial, but then, you know, you're going to have the brands that are going to want it front and center. And at the end of the day, we all want to get paid and keep the lights on and keep things moving. And if you're able to, as a production company, grow and focus some on what you want to do as highly creative and then some that kind of pays the bills, that's a smart way of doing business.
I mean, can you put a percentage on that? I mean, content, of course, is king. That's the goal. But, you know, also revenue is very important. So, I mean, could you kind of put a percentage like 70-30, 80-20, or 100-0? On content versus placement of products and things like that and revenue?
I mean, you know, I would say as our company is, I just started up a new company, and I like to say that we're a creative content company because that also is a production company, but you produce creative content, some of it are truly subjective as to how creative it is when you have certain brands involved. But the majority of what we're doing at this point is probably 80-20, 80 on the true storytelling side and 20 on the more branded side. As we grow, it's going to be, I guess it's sort of that crystal ball thing again, not really.
Well, then you start to ask, that's where it leads into my next question, how indie production companies are different than these major, large production corporations. And I think one of the major differences, and I'm sure you guys would agree, and maybe you can discuss it, is the content to revenue focus. Would you agree that, I mean, their focus is clearly much more on revenue because they have shareholders and things to answer to.
Yeah, I mean, not having, being independently held
Yeah.
and not having to protect certain margins or certain legacy issues or, often in these larger companies that, I've been a part of in my past, your deals would somehow be predicated on deals of sister companies, and if you're breaking precedent, and there were things that could not come together. And when you're, independent and, still have a very swift kind of lift type of maneuverability, I think that really, really plays to your favor. You're not about necessarily somebody else's bigger agenda 3,000 miles away, and that allows us. Obviously the cost. There's difference in level and cost and scale, and I think, if you just look at business, a lot of these gigantic, massive beasts, whether it's Eastman Kodak 100 years ago or whether it's Yahoo facing the problems now, can be circled by smaller brands like Facebook, that 4 years ago came out of the ether. And so everybody starts small. And we use that's diminutive size, I think, to our advantage in that way.
I was just going to say, but I think what none of us are really talking about, though, up here is the scrap that the production company ends up getting into generally with the network. And what none of us are saying is that we're all talking about revenue that we don't really share in for the most part. What none of us are saying is that we have to generally, inherit some type of deal that the network has done through their ad sales group that the producers then are asked to accommodate, and generally in revenue that we are not necessarily sharing. So unless, like his company, and we had just announced a partnership recently where we're working with some brands directly, but that's a little bit different model, different distribution method. But in the traditional sense, if I come up with an idea and I go sell that show, to a network, and generally, for some type of, version of a license fee or some type of, rights, whatever it is, we're not generally sharing in those revenues, because that's how the network has to monetize then that investment that they've made into making that show, of how they make their money back. So myself, my company, we have other ways and things within our company as we scale our capabilities to then make margin as we build out our production capabilities that now are actually greater than the fees that we make on the show. So that's how we've grown our business, really, because it is such a fight between our business affairs and the network's business affairs to try and get any piece of that. Now, as you continue, and really, it was funny when I was asked to be on this panel. It's like how indies make their mark. I said, I will be the shortest, answer panelist ever. You got to make a hit, man. That's the real answer, and nobody in this entire place knows exactly what that hit is going to be until the people, the audience, they tell us what that hit is going to be. And then you have, a little bit more swagger within your deals to get some of those things. And not every show is like The Apprentice. And that is kind of like the platinum answer, of that's how you integrate brands into a show, because in that particular show, the brands are the stars, of every episode. But that's not really the case in a lot of the traditional types of shows that we're selling, be it in docusoaps, small formats, whatever it is.
I was going to say one thing we do that's a little to offset this is that, half of our business is completely different. It's promotion and marketing. We find ourselves producing promos and branding and show packaging for series that are competing maybe against our original content, and we approach that with absolutely the same aggression and passion that we do our original series, because, especially for a smaller company in original series like ours, we have 3 series at this point. You can go down, up and down versus where you're actually producing and having programming on the air, and you can go from feast to famine and hot one moment, then you're gone the next. And we've seen that over and over again. So by having a completely separate business, completely different, promotion and marketing, where the development is, it has a different level of risk. We sometimes call it quick money, sometimes lower margins, but that actually allows us to sustain on an ongoing basis an infrastructure and a production to take these risks on original series and presentations and that type of thing. So we're completely a hybrid.
So you can find your hit.
Yeah. So we can find our hit. Yeah, take a lot more swings. Because if we were only at this point, if we only were about original series, the prospects wouldn't be quite as great as the fact that it's these two worlds working together. It's funny. We produce a show called Swamp Wars on Animal Planet, and we ended up producing the promos for Nat Geo Swamp Men. We did the main titles for Swamp People on history and the logos. And you know, this happens all the time. And some people are like, aren't you like competing against yourself? I'm like, not really. We're actually sustaining the bigger idea.
I'll say that I think I'll put a fine point on what Jason said, which is producing for fees is a very difficult business to be in because networks are capping it and you just can't make that much. And so one of the things you have to look at is how do you know, everyone talks about retaining rights as a good way to do it. That's challenging. You always want to sell internationally, but you know, we've used brands actually to retain additional rights. So for example, we did a show where we co-financed the show by getting brands to help fund the show and retaining additional rights. So, which was a great win because we made money on the branding, we owned additional rights, and we gave the network, and this was the key, a more expensive show for half the cost. And so I think what I would say, whether you can do that or not, is find a way to give somebody something they can't get normally, right? So find a channel that's looking for a bigger idea that you could do something with, bring them a piece of talent that they want, that they can't get someplace else, or figure out a new way to exploit it using, whether it's Facebook or whatever. That will get you in the door and will help drive profitability, even if it's not a monster hit like The Apprentice. If it's just a cable show, you can make as much money on Pawn Stars or you know, something on AETN today than I think you can on you know, broadcast network in many ways.
No, is that where it's heading, where you're having to broker your own deals with the brands directly and then take it to the network?
If you can, great. I mean, you know, like anybody here, we're all trying to find the things that we can control. You know, networks are the slow dinosaurs. And, you know, just in any business, the established players, you know, I see my friend Paul Buccieri works at ITV. It's a giant business. You know, he's got a giant monolith. We're up here with a handful of people trying to make things happen in a different way. And you just have to always look for the next thing because large networks or large production companies, they are, as we said earlier, managing for margin and feeding a global beast. So whether it's brands, whether it's online, Netflix, Hulu, finding new players that are just doing reality, that's where you have to go to find, you know, to feed yourself.
Now, how does, now, when you're looking for new ideas and you're looking for that hit you talked about, like where are you looking? What are you looking for?
Something that
in
will
the
inspire you.
swamps.
In the swamps.
Yeah.
There's about 5
Yeah.
shows just about the swamps.
Well, it's redneck America out there that's dominated the TV, and I think perhaps I co-created the show Pawn Stars. I mean, we basically changed history, and I think changed the entire airways with that show. Not that those guys are truly redneck, but I mean, listen, we've opened it up, and that's. And I think when you're ideating from a production company point of view, you're looking at everything. I mean, I have a casting director who's casting around for great ideas. I have a development team that's constantly reading the papers, fishing, looking in social media, you know, just reading what data that we have accessible to us. We've also partnered with a major entertainment studio that's encrypted, and we're partnering with them on the reality side, and they've given us some data that they've mined with and they're much larger company. And you can kind of feed off of that and come up with ideas. So it's research and what's in the marketplace. You turn on the TV, see what's there, research online. Ideas can kind of come from anywhere.
It's also relationships. I mean, I think we're all saying somewhat of the same thing in as much as the more swings at bat you take, the better off you're going to be. The more you're in front of a buyer and you're talking to them, whether it's here or in a pitch, you're finding out what they really want. I mean, the things that they send to the agencies that say, you know, Spike is looking for such and such. By the time it gets to you, you know, it's been filtered through so many layers. You know, like any business, the closer you can get to the source, the more you can find out. And the question we always ask is, don't tell us what you're telling the general community because that's not going to help me. Tell me something that's in the back of your mind, maybe time no object, money no object. What is it that you're thinking? What's something you wouldn't say, just a nugget of idea, not a big idea, just something noodling there, and you build off that. That's where you have to get to, and then then you're having them tell you what you should be developing, and that's very helpful.
And yes to all of that, but
But no.
no,
Not at all.
But not at all.
no,
But you're wrong.
nope. And
Okay.
As soon as they're done, you know, telling you because they just walked out of a development meeting and, you know, you have a relationship there and et cetera, the other answer to that is they don't know until they see it. Sometimes, and a lot of times, you have a certain instinct or a certain passion, or something is going to work. And yeah, I mean, Pawn Stars is a terrific example that pioneered not only a pop culture phenomenon, but lots of genres and businesses, even that guys up here have profited from and sold shows like that in other pawn shops to other networks, etc. Me being one of them. But sometimes until you walk in that door with that great cast or that awesome sizzle reel or that great, something that they go, wow, I wasn't even looking for that. I didn't even think that, but I showed it to my boss and they flipped out over it and now we want to do that. So yes, cultivate the relationships. Yes, the important dialogue to have, but also sometimes they don't even know until you walk it in that door and show them.
I think for, and it all depends on what your model. I mean, when we're not a big volume player, we intentionally, even though our show is called Swamp Wars, it really was not designed to be. That was a title that was, I would say, not inflicted, but it was hoisted upon us. But we actually take a different approach in that we try not to go in when, if right now it's rednecks, or if it's swamps, or if it's pawn shops, or if it's towing companies that are in the zeitgeist. We intend to actually try to go in as different a direction as we possibly can. So whenever we do come in, they may not like what we have. It may not be a show that's right for them, but at least we start creating the idea that when these guys come in, it is going to be something that they weren't waiting for, they weren't expecting. It's not the 7th iteration of a dating show, and that's about a brand distinction, and that's hard. I mean, everybody is trying to do the same thing we are, which is try to get beyond that next curve. But we, as a design, if something is, an idea is on 2 or 3 networks, we're absolutely going to avoid that territory because we don't want to be. That's just not how we choose to compete. We choose to compete by going off in a very, very different area, hoping that, we're a first mover. And that's, I think, a dream we all have. I think everybody wants to be what you were, with Pawn Stars, and I think that's, it's a different way of approaching it.
I was reading the NATPE Daily magazine this morning, and there was one article they had interviewed Jonathan from Buena Murray, and he had said, he develops everything for a specific buyer, and as an indie, you cannot do that. It's the exact opposite. I mean, even for the shows that we create a sizzle for, I mean, if my internal development team says this will really work for that one network, I say, and what other 5 networks? What other 6 or 7 networks can you tell me that are going to buy that? Because as an indie, you're just kind of starting out, or as I like to say for us, we're a startup, we're not a start over. You have to really think about how many buyers are there, because it's not about what you can make, it's about what you can sell.
So what were some of the, just out of curiosity, what were some of the other networks you were thinking about with Pawn Stars? Because it seems like a perfect fit for history, so I'm curious, what are the other ones you were thinking of?
The first network that I can truly remember pitching that it seemed like the ride home was True TV. And they said the characters weren't big enough.
Really?
Which was interesting.
What do they say now?
Yeah, exactly. They say, thank you for that other show.
They say thank you for Hardcore Pawn.
Yeah, thank you for...
Whatever that is.
But that was
I'm doing a pawn show at True TV. I love those guys.
But we pitched a history, and the rest was history.
The rest was history.
Yeah.
Now, you'd mentioned relationships, and I know that must be a major challenge as far as an independent producer to get those relationships, because in every business it's a boys club. It's you call your friends when you're looking for something or someone, and like, how do you cultivate a relationship that gets you the call first?
That is probably the biggest challenge as a new entrant is, the business has been vibrant for 10 years, so nobody wants to lose their job, so they pick working with people that have already been working with, right? It's a circular reference. So, the same 10 producers are producing, 80% of the stuff out there. Once in a while you break through with a giant hit. Everyone on the panel has something that they can point to. So how do you do it if you don't have that? Well, you have to work really hard. I like to call it sort of like a blackjack theory. Like, the idea of blackjack is stay in the game long enough so that you can get a good hand and double down, right? Even if you don't play. Stay in the leg, let the house beat you. So it's the same thing here. You have to keep working it until you find an opening, whether it's because you walk in with a piece of unique talent, or you have a great show, or you have a friend who now you used to produce with is now a development executive. You just have to keep applying it and waiting for that small opening, and then when you see it, double down, get it done, and knock it out of the park with a great show.
So what is the, I mean, other than cultivating the relationships, because that has to be one of the most important parts other than content creation, what is the most important thing for an indie producer? Let's say that I'm deciding to throw my hat into the ring. What is the most important thing that I need to do today?
I think you need to find a great piece of content that you can sell, and that means, you know, doing your homework. Just like Colby said about reading, finding an asset, something that's special. I mean, I think the things that sell are either things that are unique to you. Like if you can buy it from anybody, why do you need to buy it from me? Because there's always going to be somebody who's got, you know, a bigger credit, no matter who you are, right? So find something that is why they need it from you. Whether it's a special thing that you found, you have the rights to some competition, or you know somebody who does something fantastic. That's what you need to find. It's something that's uniquely yours where you can walk in and shop that. That'll get people's attention.
I think there's an evolutionary process of being a producer in today's market. When you're a producer, it's not a good enough thing to walk in with a great piece of talent. You have to really think about what else is there around the talent. I mean, is that talent a brand unto themselves? Do they have are they in the top 20 of YouTube, followers, or do they have a lot of likes? Do they have, you have to really think. I'm being, as a producer, asked to think about things that never before asked of a producer. What's the social media strategy? What are the things around that brand? It's not enough to walk in and make a splash. You have to bring the party too.
You have to
and
bring
I think
them to
that's
business.
important.
It's a whole business you're walking
It's
in
a business
with.
strategy.
Everybody who watches, these things like Bravo, they see how these are businesses unto themselves. So they want you to think about what is going to make them look good, which is not just the show.
And what's interesting though about that, and just having colleagues, and we all idea share, and people talk about, hey, take a look at this, take a look at that, and yes, at times you are asked to kind of come in there with the entire strategy, but what you can't ever get away from, and there has to be the steak to the sizzle, because I've watched people go in and literally pitch, yes, and here's your social media, and it can be, this, and it can be that, and blah, 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 blah. And the executive with a glossed over look in their face goes, but what's the show? So I think that you also can get so caught up in selling the ancillaries that you don't drive the primary. And the primary is, what's the show? Why do people care? What is this world? What is this process? And who's leading us through it? And why am I going to tune in? And that's got to be a great show.
I think Jason's 100% right. You think of it like as concentric circles, right? At the bullseye is a great piece of TV. And if you've hit that, then you can move to the next level. So whether that's social media or branded integration, you also have to remember that buyers, they don't get paid for profitability. They get paid for putting great shows on TV. So when you start talking about what the digital strategy is to a network buyer, that's not their thing. They've got a colleague whose thing it is, but it's their thing to put something on TV. What are the ratings? That's how they get checked in.
Yeah, and you're not going to get to that colleague until you win that person
That's
over.
right.
By the same token, I do think it's always important to try to arm them with as much ammunition when they go in as possible, whether it is on the brand side, whether it's even, sometimes we walk in with promos for the spot. We walk in obviously with, notions on brand integration. And so anything you can do to make their jobs easier, because they're seeing hundreds of pitches, and you want to make their jobs of championing whatever it is you're doing as seamless as possible. And sometimes, if you leave a lot of those things open out there, things can go awry. So as much as you can lay out possibilities or ideas so they're not perhaps misinterpreted, that creates, I was a buyer for a long time, and when people would come with, as you say, the concentric circles, a very strong idea, but then also help me and give me additional arguments of why this works. And also, we'll actually, when you're talking about double down, I mean, we'll produce the same sizzle reel 4 different ways, slightly skewed for the different buyers. So you try to, almost with the tape, anticipate what the objections and questions will be to give yourself and whoever's on the other end a better chance of getting through the system. And the system is a gauntlet.
And
so
that's probably one of the biggest problems is no matter who you pitch, they're not the buyer, right? Because, so I call it like the half-life of a pitch. If I pitch you, and you've got to pitch someone, and they've got to pitch someone, you're losing probably half of the emotion. I mean, part of being a producer is the ability to, in the room, convince them. It's not like we have, a scripted show has a script, right? And so they read everything, and it's all laid out. Here, we've got a 3-minute reel, and maybe some boards, and maybe a treatment, but it's not a script. And so you've got to arm them with enough that pitch cannot lose all the emotion that you get in the room, because that's what it's about. And since you never pitch the buyer, it's got to go through that vast gauntlet of sort of watering down the whole time and still stand as a, I must have this, versus the 1,000 other ideas I saw this week.
Well, I think that also speaks to what you were saying, actually also to the bullseye point. Like, if you are the half-life to the pitch, I mean, you really do need those Facebook stats, because those things are hard numbers, and if you have somebody pitching your pitch and pitching your pitch, then they start to lose the emotion and the intensity. So, I mean, you have to walk in with, in theory, a list of things to support the show, but while at the same time keeping the show in mind without losing the fact that it's a show.
And do you know what trumps that list of 100 other things?
So.
Is having another competitive network want the same show. So that leapfrogs right to the top of the list.
That's right.
my friend.
Right up there.
Well, that's it, because people don't want to take risks, right? I mean, you know, you look at in the feature business, everybody's making movies based on former intellectual property, whether it's a superhero movie or a girl with a dragon tattoo, a multinational bestseller. So it's the same thing in the unscripted world, right? Like, why take a risk? Oh, so buy a format from Europe and put it on the air and call it, you know, take Pop Idol, call it American Idol. Take, you know, the Voice and make it The Voice. So anything that you can do to help them not feel like it's a total risk is useful. Now, out of nowhere comes Pawn Stars, and that breaks every rule, or something like that. But you have to do whatever it takes, whether it's the Facebook stats or a piece of talent that's globally known, or whatever it is, anything that makes them feel more secure that they're not taking as much of a risk will get you much farther along, however you do that.
That's also very, I mean, that whole other part about coming in with knowing the second tier, if they ask about social media and things of that sort, it's very self-serving, but you have to do it because you don't want to leave the network, leave it in their hands completely about how they're going to market and promote your show, because then you'll only be on the air for 2 episodes, you know, because they'll just kind of, a lot of networks will just throw it up there and see what sticks, you know. There's no promotion, no marketing, they'll tell you that up front. And so unless you have another buyer and you're playing this sort of bidding war, you're in this situation where you better have talked to the 20 people at that network table and given them you want some extra shoulder content that you can put out there in mobile? I'll give it to you. Just, you have to take that extra step. Otherwise, you know, being noticed and having a hit, or even, you know, a very basic good network run, which might be 2 seasons, it ain't gonna happen.
Every time we work with a brand, we did a show last year and we worked with brands, and we got the brands to contribute co-marketing dollars as well as cash to the show. And whenever we sell a show, we work with the advertising arm of that network, which, you know, is somewhat of an awkward situation because they're very protective. But we've worked this out with a number of networks, and they love it because we're bringing additional dollars. Because you're right, they're not going to promote it. They got 50 things they're going to look for. I got one thing I care about, and so we try and bring advertising promotion, you know, whether it's digital or print or in-store stuff, and it's vastly helpful and makes the network really happy.
No, we all know that social media has changed every business on earth over the past 5 years. In particular, how has it really changed television and production? How has it changed what you're doing? How has it made you have to think differently over the past few years?
Before I got into TV, I actually worked for Microsoft. So, you know, years ago, and so I was, you know, MSN back, you know, 10, 12, 15 years ago. So I've watched this transpire over, you know, a long period of time. And what I would say is this, is that the whole, when we were kids, there were 3 networks, right? And you could get a 50 share. And then, you know, 10, 20 years ago, there started to be cable networks. And now there's a lot of channels, and this is just another channel. So Hulu and Netflix are exactly what we were talking about, other buyers. And the more buyers that are interested in this type of content, the better for us. And so looking at those guys as buyers and as mechanisms to promote something is phenomenal. We're doing a show with USA. It's a documentary about doing good. 4 NFL superstars have an issue, and you know, we see how it plays out, and we're using an online partner to help us. And so those are promotional ways to do things like that. You know, they really can drive. It's symbiotic.
You know, I think one way it's also helped is that everybody involved with the show, and it grows exponentially, becomes a promotional partner, whether it's your talent, whether it's your talent's friends, whether it's your staff. And that's interesting, because you can see how this can actually catch on like wildfire. By the same token, because everybody's aware, your talent and some of the participants are very aware of what is being said about them and what comments are being made about them, where they may not they may not be on the, a very lightly trafficked network site where there's a forum, but when it's actually out in the ether and they're seeing, a comment made by their peers, that you also have to combat the way that information is coming back at them. They can become much less, they can become more standoffish. They can become very concerned about things they're doing because you get such instant feedback. And we put a lot out there, but then also a lot of it comes back, and then that's additional thing to manage. Almost immediately, why the series is airing, you can sit there right there with the folks involved with your production and the talent and see the response, and you can be saying, oh, I shouldn't have said that, and you've got to manage that for the future. So that does make it a challenge as far as producing.
There's also those great apps where you can play along with the TV show. I mean, the dual screen watching is a big part of it. I know that, The Voice or any of these music genre shows, they use a lot of social media to help not only drive tune-in, but keep viewers engaged during the commercials. I mean, it's a big component. I think the production manual for the digital side of something like The Voice, it's like a 100-page document on how to exploit it. So it's a big part of that.
I do want to remind everybody we're going to be taking questions in just a few minutes, so if you have one, then start thinking about it now. This panel discussion is called Making a Footprint in a Crowded Space, How Indies Make Their Mark. So I'm going to ask you each to answer that question. How does an indie make their mark in a crowded space? Do you want to start?
Sure. First of all, you got to wear a pocket square. It's essential.
It's essential.
Essential. Other than that, I think, again, it goes to find a great piece of content that you can really make people emotional about. We're in the emotion business. If you watch a 2-minute trailer and you don't feel something, then you haven't done a good job. You have to, you have to make people laugh, cry, etc. That's what we're in the business of, is making people feel something. So start with that, and then do all the other things that we talked about. Work your contacts, come to the trade shows, be relentless. When you meet somebody, make sure they introduce you to somebody else. That's how you know you're moving down the food chain and getting people. So it's be relentless and get a piece of fantastic content.
All right.
Yeah, I would say, I will not wear a pocket square. So I go back to.
You said to find another way to do it.
I go back to you got to make a hit. And nobody knows, I still stand by that, nobody knows, what a hit is going to be. Again, take a great show, which I'm a fan of. Pawn Stars really came out of nowhere. If you kind of looked at it and analyzed it, on paper, by all means, at that time, at that moment, it shouldn't have worked, but it did, and it created an entire category, for lots of people. But create a reputation for yourself. Now I'm done being a smartass, but create a reputation for yourself, and that comes from being known for a something. Be known for, hey, you know what? Those guys, their stuff looks great. Their stuff. They have the best directors of photography. They have the best editors. They put the best polishes on their work. Those guys make things look great. Or wow, those guys. I don't know where they find them, swamps, pond places, whatever it is. They find great characters. When those guys come in with a pitch, you know what? We might not buy it all the time, but we love their characters. So grab a hold of something and then own it and become the best at that, because that's how you make a reputation for yourself.
Chris?
And then leverage it.
Wow.
Good luck.
I echo. That's echo. I would say just as a a corollary to that, because I'm right down complete with what you're saying. Is that I think you have to be passionate. And when I was a buyer, you had a lot of people who approached it like a commodity business. It was like, oh, when that guy comes in, it's going to be like, well, if you don't like this, I got this. It was like you were down in the Bowery trying to buy old watches. So if the notion of when you come in that you really are passionate and you have that reputation, don't walk in with three or four. Don't okay, on to the next one. You're not playing like name that tune. Cultivate your idea, really be buttoned up, have your answers, be passionate about it, absolutely leverage it. And I also believe be selective. When you're talking, but beyond that, I think what we're doing is we're talking a lot about the sell. One thing that's taught myself is, because half our business is a pure service business, is never lose sight of what it means to collaborate with a network, which at the end of the day is your client. And when they're your client, shows that'll be on the bubble will die because of difficult talent or difficult experience, where you're coming at them from overages, or you're ignoring notes, or you're being combative, or you're being an auteur. And so that's going to make the bar that much higher, not only for your existing show, but when you come back. So if you create a sport dearth policy, that is brutal. So there's a lot of what, it sounds like we're trying to talk about selling Toyotas, but there is a lot of service after the sell and placing a big premium on that experience and how you manage that network, because you will see them again, probably in this job, or they're going to change jobs in 2 years, and you're going to see them somewhere else, and they're going to tell 2 friends and 10 friends, and pretty soon your reputation becomes, well, that's your legacy much more in the show.
I think diversification of business, just like a financial portfolio, whether it's rentals or production services, is a good way to keep the lights on, keep gas in the tank while you're looking to get that hit. No hit is made overnight, despite what some people believe. I mean, I didn't have a hit till I was in the business for 15 years. So, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. I think be relentless, care about your reputation. I think packaging it's always been true, but it's now more than ever true. Package your idea, know it in and out, know what the hurdles are going to be. But when you walk in with a piece of talent, if you're an indie who doesn't have a reputation yet, package it up with somebody else who does have a reputation. I'm not talking about being acquired by that company, though that's probably not a bad thing financially. You'll know, and you guys know this with the TNT show that you guys have coming out. You got great names attached to it, and it makes the sale that much more likely.
All right. Do we have any questions? Anybody like to ask any questions today? One question. Since you got a broken wing, we'll go with you first.
I take pity all the time.
You should.
Okay, so I see that all you guys are involved in reality, and the last point that you just made was diversification. Do you guys, in your development teams, do you guys vet potential scripted stories, and how often do you find something that you think that, okay, we can put money behind that?
Yeah, I'll answer that one real quick. And this goes back to finding a great piece of talent. But our company has diversified. We have taken that step. For me, who comes actually from scripted comedy, but then to kind of do a lot of what I've done in reality. We are, and it was already announced. We started filming in February a new show for Nick at Night. It is their first original scripted sitcom that we're doing with Scott Baio, which is great. So we're bringing him back to primetime sitcom comedy. So yes, we have diversified, and we're proud to be partners with Nick at Night on that project.
Can I be clear about the diversification thing too? I think if this goes back to having a reputation, if you're good at unscripted, be really great at unscripted. Don't start thinking about, well, I can do the scripted show too, and then I can do all these other things. I mean, you have a core business. It's like my brother-in-law, when I was asking him about buying a building, he's like, you're not a landlord. Don't buy the building. Do what you do best and stick with that. Diversification is the sort of the other stuff within that nonfiction space. But if you come from scripted, it's a totally different thing. But if you are a great reality producer, stick with that, grow your business, have 8 to 10 shows that you can claim on the air at once, and then start thinking on the fringes of what you don't necessarily know.
One way to get into the diversification is, approach like on the TNT show you just referenced, we're doing, it's called The Great Escape. It's, an original idea we created. We brought together Ron Howard, who you don't usually see associated with unscripted, and then Burt Van Munster from The Amazing Race. And so if you think about that in the scripted, if you're a non-writer in a scripted world, that's even worse than in reality. So the way to get in, because, you're producing, which is important, but it's difficult. So the way to think about it there, if you're not a writer, is who can you put together, bring people together? Like, that's your job as a producer, is to bring people together. We're working on a scripted show where we got a feature writer who's never done TV, who wants to get into TV. So we found sort of what I would call an arbitrage, where it's like, hey, we can bring you into here, we already have this relationship with the network, and you put it together. And I think that's where you can come as a producer, if that's what you're interested in.
And that's selling something special.
Yes.
All right. Thank you guys very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Gentlemen.